Have you ever had an aha moment? The moment when the penny drops? Something that's been perhaps obvious to you subconsciously for years, but you didn't really quite see it? Well, mine came probably about 14 or 15 years ago. I'd been a financial advisor for nearly 20 years at that point. And although I'd spent many years talking to clients about planning their futures first and thinking about the finances to fund those futures second rather than the other way around, I nevertheless found myself using some fairly typical, almost banal, surface-scratching questions that you may yourselves have been asked or thought about. What am I going to do in retirement? Is it play more golf, do some gardening, time with the grandchildren? But one day, I was asked a question that I had frankly been asked many times before, but in this particular instance, it was kind of weird, because the question being asked of a client, a couple, was could they afford to retire? Now, at the time, I could have fallen off the chair I was sitting on in this guy's office because he was the chief executive of a global multinational corporation. So of course he could afford to retire. He could afford my retirement and my then team's retirement. I answered his question in quite the same way that I'd answered it before, which is that rather depends on your lifestyle, what types of holidays you might take, whether you're always going to fly first class, whether you eat in Michelin-starred restaurants, or whether you're going to do something far more basic when it comes to taking time off. But fundamentally discussing your lifestyle. I didn't really think very much more about it at that point, when, by weird coincidence, a matter of a few weeks later, in conversation with another client, broadly the same age, who happened to be the global technology officer of one of the biggest management consulting businesses in the world, asked me the same question. And I thought, this is odd. We had the same conversation. Again, it didn't immediately sink in. It was probably about 9 or 10 months later. I became aware that that first client had been suffering from depression. And eventually, the penny dropped. Neither of these people were asking me whether they could afford to retire or not. It was the obvious question for them because we're conditioned to think about our futures based purely on money and not on what we want to do. They were really asking is what the hell are we going to do now? What do we do next? How am I going to live? They were frightened. And it's not unusual to find people who leave work without a plan becoming depressed. In fact, your risk of suffering from depression at retirement increases by 40%. A good way to avoid that is to make sure that you retire to something and that you don't retire from something.